Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Orange Sparkle Ball. Are you struggling to implement innovation and change within your organization? With a unique human-centered innovation approach, Orange Sparkle Ball, or OSB, helps organizations break through roadblocks and pain points to achieve measurable results. OSB is not your typical consultancy. OSB's agile approach to innovation allows you to move quickly to action and achieve measurable pilot results. To learn how you can drive innovation and success in your organization, contact OSB today at hello@osb.co. That's hello@osb.co. Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Friday, May 19th, 2023, coming to you from just outside of Spirit Plaza. I am Jer Stays, and
I am Devon O'Reilly.
It must be Friday.
It must be Friday. Mr. Friday is here. We're hanging out in Detroit, and we're going to talk Detroit and some other things. So I'm excited, Jer.
Yeah, there has been a lot going on, and I think we're going to take a little bit of a victory lap later in the show.
But I want to start with where you've been, Jer.
Devon, I had the chance to talk to Carla Hall from Food Network, from The Chew, from all that stuff, and I caught up with her at the Durfee School on Detroit's near west side, just west of the Lodge. So I can't wait to share that with you.
Durfee is an amazing space. There's always cool things going on there. I'm glad Carla found her way there. Shout out to Life Remodeled, Chris Lambert and the whole team there. This is a really interesting conversation, and I can't wait to hear it, Jer.
Carla Hall, is it okay to start this with like a Hootie Hoo?
Hootie Hoo!
It's so good to see you. What brings you to Detroit?
Well, I have been working with the Genio team and going around the country. This is our 5th school celebrating the cafeteria workers because I feel like they are the unsung heroes and what they do for the children. I mean, we talk a lot about the teachers, but food is fuel and energy, and so we really want to celebrate them. And the fact that now is School Lunch Hero Month, which is amazing. Thank you, Michigan.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And, you know, these kids, if they don't have the proper nutrition, they're not going to make it through that day. Like, there's a lot to do.
No, they're not going to learn. They're going to be drifting off. Their attention spans are short. They're going to be drifting off to sleep. Blood sugar levels drop. And so it's really important. And so not only do we think of lunch, we also think about the breakfast that some of the kids get in the morning, and also some of the kids get dinner if they have activities after school.
You know, over the years, is it something that you thought always that you'd want to do this kind of give back work? Or is this something where the opportunity kind of arise to do it? Because, I mean, you bring so much like heart and soul into this. Even watching the kids a few minutes ago, it's like you were ready.
I love what I do. I don't say yes to any project unless I can be 100% in. I don't want to resent it. Everything that I say yes to actually feeds me and energizes me. So as a chef, you're constantly giving back because you're working at soup kitchens and you're doing, I mean, you go to culinary school and that's a part of culinary school. But when I got on the Chew, I said, what do I want to do with this platform? And the checklist of one is food insecurity and children. Those are 2 of the things on my checklist.
That's absolutely awesome. For somebody listening at home, you know, this is a rare opportunity to talk to you. Like, what are a couple of things that you would tell them about being in the kitchen and doing things? One of the things I noticed right away is you were like, move with urgency.
Yes. I mean, when you have a dish with cold butter, you need to move with urgency. Otherwise, you have to throw it in the refrigerator. I think measuring flour, a lot of people don't understand. We didn't really measure. Everything was measured for them today. Measuring flour, whisking your flour, spooning it into the measuring cup, taking a straight edge and sort of leveling it off. That makes a huge difference in your baking. Understanding the balance of flavors, salt, whether it's with sweets or savory food. Also, food and following recipes has a way of you being all in. It uses all of your senses, right? You can't look at a recipe and it says, okay, cook this in 10 minutes. And then at 5 minutes, it's burned, but you're going to keep it another 5 because you're giving power to what is written on the page. A recipe is only a guide. And I really try to teach people how to use all of their senses to cook with so that you're more engaged in that recipe.
So what's next for you? I know you always got a ton of projects. You don't seem like somebody who ever stops.
I mean, if anybody knows Enneagrams, I'm a 7. I'm the adventurer. So, I'm always doing things. And I have silos of things that I'm working on. So right now there's summer baking. So it's on the Food Network right now. And then later on in the year, Halloween. Oh, my God. What? Instead of the Hootie Hoo, it's Boo. And then I have holiday baking. Also, I had a children's book that I did last year, and I'm working on another children's book that is coming out next year. So I've finished that project, which is amazing, and I love that. I will also be working with the honey board. So I love honey, and we had honey on our biscuits today. So I'm always thinking about recipes to use with honey. That was one of the ones that I went after. I'm like, oh, I mean, there's certain companies that you love working with. And I tell you, this partnership with Genio and Hormel has been so much fun. And this is our last school. I'm really sad that this is the last school that I will visit this year. But we're ending on a high note because it's School Lunch Heroes Month. I'm like, yes.
Before I go, first off, how do you think people can help support their local lunchrooms?
There are a lot of volunteers that come through here today. I've met a farmer here who got involved sort of as a side adjunct. I think understanding what the school is doing, sort of getting involved with packing lunches. Everybody can't just walk in the door at a school, but just understand what your children are eating and get involved with the school district, because school lunches have changed dramatically from when I was in school, and that's because it's community involvement.
And you think for the better?
Oh, absolutely for the better. And and a lot of the students, I'm looking at these salads, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all the colors in that salad. And the students are like, we don't want anything healthy. But they also had this Detroit-style pizza today that was really great that the chefs made here at Central High, and they have a pizza oven.
I personally love this shift, like seeing, I walk by the pizza oven, I walk by all this stuff and seeing like fresh ingredients where there's the mixer in there and all that other stuff. That's hugely important. What did you learn on your trip over the last few cities?
I learned that a lot of these cafeteria workers get very emotional when you look at them and you're like, thank you, I see what you're doing. And then sometimes they're thinking, well, why do I have to come in today? And they realize that the day is dedicated to them, and they get really choked up because they know how much work they do. And when I see the students coming through and say, hey, this is really great, and I come into the student body may not say anything to them, but when you say, hey, do you want to thank your school heroes, the cafeteria workers, and like, of course. And I think that the students sort of forget about that, but I see how it has changed the cafeteria workers for feeling like all the gratitude that has come in their way.
Carla, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much. This was fun. Have some biscuits.
Now I have a second place that I've been.
Look at you, just the man about town. All right, what do you got?
Only with your permission. You're usually the man about town. If I can share a second, if I may.
I permiss some about towning.
All right. I believe that me and engineer Randy Walker accidentally went to the last night of Flaming Embers.
But it just opened.
Like April 8th. Like literally grand opening, grand closing.
Okay, well, do we know a little bit more about that? Because something sounds, as you like to say, Jer, sus.
Sus is true. There's a little bit of tea out there in the world in multiple reports. Best I can understand, they wanted to switch concepts. The ownership wanted to switch concepts. I believe that license is held by Michael Higgins, who owns the Broderick Tower. That's right next to the Buddy's Pizza right there. And I had never been to this place, Flaming Embers, because I just hadn't had a time. It just opened. And I got in there, and it had that, quiet/dead bar vibe. It was really weird. And then I got in there and I realized that some of the clown bar decor was still there.
No, not the clown bar.
Oh my gosh, 100% with the black and white stripes. Do you remember over by the bar? And then some of the banquettes of the very bright colors. Now there were no clowns, but this was supposed to be a queer and inclusive space for the LGBTQ plus community. Of course, Randy is openly a member of that. So we were glad to go in and have a drink and see what it was all about. But there really wasn't much to remark about. And now my feeling ends up being true. And I read that it's going to revert back to the Detroit Sports Bar and Grill, which is pretty much the most common name you could ever think of.
Yeah, the clown bar decor and motif is still just burned into my brain, as is the mural that they had at one point.
What mural?
In the clown bar, they had a mural of what definitely was a giant Mike Higgins straddling the Broderick Tower and stepping on the David Whitney building, which sits across the street.
What?
That way it was in there, yeah. I mean, I'm one of the 12 people who actually went to the clown bar when it was around for one fateful night. But yeah, I don't think the mural lasted very long. I think there might have been a little bit of pushback from that, but it's burned into my brain. So You said this like dead bar vibe. That's all that has ever existed in that corner, no matter what it's been.
That is a shame because, number one, the Flaming Embers name, I wanted to give this place a chance because the Flaming Embers name is so iconic in Detroit history. My mom loved the Flaming Embers, but like the vibe just wasn't there, and I just didn't feel the fabulousness that I was looking for. And I don't mean to knock whatever work was done, but I want to understand if there's going to be a bad energy, if things were about to close, of course there's going to be like bad energy coming in there. Why is it that this place can't seem to find a footing? Because you'd think being next to the ballpark, look, attendance is down. It was only 16,000 when I went to the game the other night. But why? Like, this should be a great location. It's right next to Grand Circus Park. It's right on Woodward. It's got tons of street frontage. Is it concepts? Is it what? I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen multiple concepts here from the Broderick Grill back almost 10 years ago now was when it started. That was more like a high end. They tried to go like bar and grill. That failed pretty quickly. It's been like 4 or 5 iterations. I used to pop in there when I lived a couple blocks away. And like you said, Jer, it was never crowded, that dead bar vibe. I don't want to point fingers, but I mean, there is a constant, and it's building ownership. And a lot of times building ownership, again, heavy lies the crown, right? I mean, when you own a building, and you've owned a building for a long time, you're a developer, you kind of have to be responsible for the tenants that come in. And if there's just this cavalcade of failures, you got to look at that, right? I think you have to take a look at that. So that's my 2 cents of what might be an issue here.
I mean, it's got to be challenging to do all this stuff. I mean, I don't know how well the Buddies is doing in the next door Madison space, which is owned by, I believe, the Bedrock people. But it's got to be a challenge. I also think it's a challenge. Here's something minor that I did not think about until just now. And I know we talked about Comerica Park on the episode with Norris. It is really hard if you're a casual fan to find anything but tin roof when you walk out of the entrances of Comerica Park. Like, there are trees that block the way of the restaurants and things on the other side. There's no signage. I think some signage would be great. Maybe even signage that lit up with, like, the places that are open right now. Something to drive people around, because people are like, well, where do we go next? Literally walk by people. And then there's some people like, well, where's the tin roof? I mean, they were able to find it because the tin roof is right next to it. There's a big old sign you can see from the ballpark. It's right there. I'm guessing they hoover up most of the traffic. I think it would be interesting to have like a little bit of like a guide. I don't see the Comerica Park people doing it if they don't own it, but I do think it would be good for Grand Circus Park to have like a little guide, like signage.
And it's incumbent upon the Grand Circus Park folks then, I think, because what you do see, and I agree with you, I'm picturing that corner there. That's a main entrance and exit, main thoroughfare. Now, the Illiches, to their credit, have really funneled you to, if you walk out on the front end, on the Woodward-facing side of Comerica, they want you right down Columbia Street. You know what I mean? They've got the lights hanging. They've got the Union Assembly there.
Which also, to their point, though, they own everything on Columbia Street.
So, exactly. So you can't expect the Illiches to drive traffic the other way. If you walk out of Comerica, the Illiches want you to just go across Woodward and just play in their playground and spend money there. So if the businesses kind of across the Grand Circus Park, which I agree are terrible sight lines, that nothing invites you, they have to get together, or someone has to kind of step up and create that inviting atmosphere, because right now, you're absolutely right, it's really only tin roof.
Yeah, and as a longtime like downtown person, if you visit a lot or whatever, you might think I'm kind of crazy, like, well, of course you should know it's there. But if you're new, if you come down a couple of times a year, which is a lot of the Tigers traffic, and you're trying to get money out of their pockets, like, people go where it's easy to see what they know. And that's one of the things about walkability is you need to have signposts and things so that people will go travel to the thing and explore, because without some direction, people don't explore.
No, exactly. Especially, the culture of kind of coming to downtown Detroit, which has traditionally been, you park for the game, you go to the game, you go back to your car. There's a lot of people that's still very ingrained in. And so you really have to entice them to come out to see what you got going on. I'm not really sure I want people judging downtown Detroit's post-game atmosphere based on Detroit Sports Bar, Clown Bar, whatever the heck that is. So I don't even think I want people going there. But whatever should be going there, you got to draw people. Maybe there's a wayfinder. Maybe you can get Gilbert involved too, because you want people to go over to like Parker's Alley, which is actually pretty close. If you kind of cut across Madison Avenue there, maybe something to drive traffic in that direction might be good. And you've got some multiple business owners, so it would behoove them to have perhaps a wayfinder.
For sure, with all the things, too, happening with the hotel over there, the changing of the branding, the new restaurants, all that stuff. Like, there could be some really, really cool things done. Devon, you called it. I want to say you called it. There is a report in Cranes, a scoop. I'll give credit where credit is due, but we kind of called it about an Apple store in downtown Detroit. Pretty much, actually, even down to the building that Bedrock is looking for an Apple store.
Yeah, they put the wrap on the windows. You could kind of see that was going to be a one concept situation. And I think we thought, there's only something that's going to take up, 3 windows of prime space on Woodward. It would be an Apple store. Frankly, Rocket and Dan Gilbert himself had mentioned the idea even years ago about an Apple store. And there's always been this idea that, I will say to his credit, Dan and Dan's team has been really focused on not just taking whoever will come along and, lease space on Woodward. They really want those prime key tenants, those marquee tenants. And Apple Store really signifies that. It's like we've made it as a downtown. And so congrats. They got the big fish. I'm sure they've been working on this for a long time. So on the inside, I'm sure they knew this was coming. But I think it's great to see. But I'll be frank, Jer, as an iPhone user, but not a Mac user, I probably won't go there. There's no reason. I don't need to go to Apple stores. I've never been to an Apple store. I've never been inside of an Apple store before.
See, I think you're an anomaly because I think a lot of people have stuff with their phones they have to do. Maybe you have good luck. But I will use this Apple store.
Do people have issues with iPhones a lot?
You break screens, like repairs and stuff like that if you want to drop it off.
You go to a guy for that. You're not going to the Apple store for a screen fix. You got somebody for that.
I feel like you are the kind of person that's got a guy for everything.
Well, when you about town as much as I do, you meet a lot of people. So yeah, I got a guy or a girl for just about anything.
I think I'd use it a lot. I think it's great to see. I also think that even though foot traffic is down and things like that, I think that if this actually does come through, as kind of the report says, that the Bedrock people are really pushing to get done and they're being very public about this, which is kind of rare, I think it will get traffic. I think it'll get used because it's a destination. It goes down to this thing in Metro Detroit that I think I've said enough times, but like Gucci is a destination. Savage Fenty, a destination. Apple, a destination. And the nice thing is they're all kind of close enough to each other that if you're going to one, you might end up at the other. And I think also it sends a big mainstream signal. Gucci's one thing, Savage Fenty's, but Apple to another sector of people is like, oh, well, there's a real reason. Because you know what? There aren't many Apple stores, especially like if you're anywhere near the inner suburbs, right? You have to go out to what? Somerset or 12 Oaks or something like that?
Yeah, I think those would be the closest Apple stores. And yeah, you're right. That logo, that brand recognition, to have that glowing apple sitting there on Woodward is huge. And to think of how far we've come when half of the storefronts on Woodward were vacant and most of it were like liquor stores, building wraps with nothing inside of them. You had the Hudson Cafe. Just thinking about the Woodward of 7-8 years ago, God, how far it's come to have an Apple store and then soon to be this luxury, crown jewel of Hudson site that will just anchor everything basically. Like what you said, Jer, basically you have these marquee tenants and then you just anchor all that down with this massive hotel, apartment complex, a little bit of everything space. And I think that is where you have the culmination of the thriving downtown you're looking for.
Before we go, an update to a story that we talked about before, the old Chung space. Robin Runyon talked about it from Urbanize. We've talked about it a little bit. It's kind of an iconic historic place right there on Cass and Peterborough. And it was one of the anchors of that era of Chinatown in Detroit. And the news is that it has been sold. The purchase price is not revealed, but it's been bought by American community developers based out of Harper Woods. They said that water needs to be pulled out and they're going to put a new roof on it. This is one I've been following for a while with my sources, and I am excited to see some progress here. I kind of know that if this sale hadn't happened when it did, I think it's been on the market for like a year, which it's crazy. We've been doing this long enough where it's like, oh, this is a year ago, whatever. I think that this was going to meet the wrecking ball and be donezo if a deal didn't come in. And so credit to O'Connor for getting this deal done. I don't know if they got their asking price for it. I think they were asking $1.5 million. I'm glad to see it. I don't know what the plans are or what they're going to do, but I am glad to see this change hands and go to somebody who wants to make something of it.
Yeah, and I'll kind of lead with cautious optimism here because I feel like we've heard some rumblings on this building before and nothing has really come to fruition. This area is going to be tough. I don't know what they're going to try and do with it, but I love the idea of preserving the Chinatown and any kind of last vestiges of the history of Chinatown that was there. I would hate to lose that, so people forget it even exists. Fun little side note. If you want to see what was that area, honest to God, the best way to do it is you go to 8 Degrees Plato or you go to the Peterborough. That hallway that kind of connects the bathrooms there has all these great, amazing old historic pictures of that area, that Chinatown area, which is where you can see just this bustling area with all these kind of Chinese lettering stores, and it's almost like a mini little Chinatown museum. So if anyone is in that area, I would highly recommend checking out. Go to the bathroom at 8 Degrees Play-Doh or Peterborough, and you can literally see some just amazing visuals of what used to be there, and it gives you an idea of the history that was unfortunately lost. So I really hope they can preserve this. I hope they can bring something there, and I hope whatever they do does actually have a little bit of that kind of Chinese Asian flair to it.
Yeah. Another fun fact I'll add, this was one of the few places in Detroit that actually had a hidden pedestrian subway to go underneath Cass because it was so busy, so you could cross from Peterborough to the school. And if you drive through there today and realize there's almost no housing left, like once you go past Detroit Shipping Company, it's grass, right? And there's a lot of abandoned buildings over by the Masonic. Think about the fact that there were so many families and kids living in that neighborhood that they were worried about traffic. They literally built an underground pedestrian subway to get to that, what became like a movie theater for a while and some other stuff across the street there. And the thing about this neighborhood that's crazy to me, there are so many like shoots of optimism, and then there's also like what's going to happen next. Like you look at it and you're like, this should be really great. But I felt that way for like 15 years. My dad felt that way, and he used to hang out around there. Like it's hard to get this one going. I feel like this needs something to push over the line. Like I look at that apartment building, which I've written before about on the website, that is across from the Detroit Shipping Company, which is shipping companies making a lot of things happen over there. But that apartment building, which I will just say it's Illich-owned, it has been sitting vacant for years. And you look at old pictures and you can see what that whole neighborhood was. And having buildings like that, and like with the demand for apartments, who wouldn't want to live like in that lifestyle phase right across from Shipping Company, right next to a redone Chung's, right next to 8 Degrees Play-Doh? Like it blows my mind that area isn't redeveloped like it should be.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer for why that is, but it certainly is that area of Midtown, I guess. It really the true Cass corridor that is still kind of on that cusp, which, again, I guess that's good and bad. There's still some affordability there. But like you said, there's really not a lot of residential anyway. So I feel like any residential that would come in there would be newly built and it would be developers trying to get a lot of money. I don't see someone coming in and building affordable housing there, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, when we were getting started, there was that studio in the shipping company. And we used to talk about this, like, why isn't this done? And it's still, we're now 5 years later.
And Shipping Company does well. I just think they're kind of like an anomaly. They were smart enough to kind of really lean into the pedal pub craze. And so they're kind of ground zero for a lot of the pedal pub takeoffs, the pedal pub launches and the returns. And they've got volleyball there now and stuff. And I think they're doing some additional development of that parking lot. So like they're doing well, but they're kind of an oasis. Well, clearly we had Founders. That's gone now. So really they are an oasis in what otherwise has been some kind of mildly successful ventures.
You know, we're not going to get into a huge bit about it because there's talk about Detroit's population dipping, but I do want to pull on to another thread about this. And I think we're going to talk a lot more about policy at the Mackinac Policy Conference. We'll get into more deeper stuff that really isn't for a Friday. But to me, and I'm even thinking about the planning for the stuff that we want to do forward going with Daily Detroit, with the newsletter, the podcast, bringing people together, it's going to be on us to do it. I don't know how much policy can play in the idea of we just have to create interesting spaces. The more and more I look at this stuff over the years and whatever, no development's perfect, right? But like the shipping company just made it go, right? 8 Degrees Play-Doh is making it go. Like people are making it go and creating unique places to do things. And I don't think that there's going to be any overreaching program. There's things that can help. There's things that people can get out of the way, which I think is a big thing. People need to get out of the way of some of these things. But I think it's going to be on us to create unique experience, weird experiences, stuff that's like, okay, we want to be in Detroit and Metro Detroit.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think that's what it boils down to, is that you look at places that are experiencing population increases, neighborhoods. Corktown is an obvious example. Well, way before Michigan Central and all the stuff that's only been happening in the last few years, you know what kind of started that population increase was hipsters moving in there because there were cool places like Slows, and then Two James, and some of these other places, Motor City Wine. And so it really was the places, these interesting places that Mercury Burger Bar, that people wanted to live around, and that created it. Those are the type of people who kind of created the density and opening cool bars and cool places and cool restaurants and places that become destinations and those kind of anchor communities and anchor neighborhoods. And you see it in other places. You see it in the Livernois Avenue of Fashion. It's brought back a lot of density to that area. Why? There's cool restaurants and bars. And that's the stuff we love to talk about. So selfishly, sure, that's great. But I really do believe that is kind of that the core of more denser neighborhoods. People want to live around coffee shops, bars, restaurants, neighborhood places that they can hang out at. So you look at any thriving neighborhood in Detroit. You look at any neighborhood in Detroit that's experiencing population growth, which there are some. They're small, but there are some. That seems to be the common thread.
Yeah, that's for stabilization and growth. I do want to shout out, you're mentioning that area right near there. Detroit Sip is alive, well, and kicking. I enjoyed that the other day. So that's a third place I've been. So you got some things to catch up with me on, Devon.
Jer, next week I'm gonna have to bring it with the places I've been. So I'll start working on that.
Thank you so much for listening to Your Daily Detroit. I hope you enjoyed this Friday episode. As always, feedback on anything we're talking about, dailydetroit@gmail.com. We want to hear it. With that, I'm Jer Stays.
I'm Devon O'Reilly.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.